What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's the good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here, and now that we've gone through rookie minicamp, we've seen the following practices and mandatory minicamps being wrapped up. I want to give you guys who my biggest winners and losers were for each of the positions on the offensive side of the ball. I'll also do the defense and probably throw in special teams with that video on the following days here, but we've gotten a chance to hear from all of the beat writers, all of the analysts that have been tuning in, the players themselves, and the coaching staffs, and I think this is a good time to essentially recap where the needle may be moving excuse me, on some of these players, and specifically keeping in mind that this mini camp overall had a good combination of veterans and rookies when available to have both. So with that said, let's get into it. Now at the quarterback position here, I would give my W to Brady Cook, if for nothing else than the fact that it seems like he's been able to leapfrog Adrien Martinez, who was one of the, I guess you can consider kind of a breakout candidate that looked really good over the course of the preseason games last year, had a big enough arm to make the plays when nothing was realistically there. Once it was time to play backyard football, had the legs that allowed him to go out there and churn, 20 plus yard deficits into first downs for us, and really seemed like he had at least the physical ability to be someone that can have kind of that Chris Streveler effect. When you looked at some of the other quarterbacks that were also playing those preseason games, I think you looked at Adrien Martinez as a little bit more of a difference maker. So seeing that as some of these practices wrapped up, Brady Cook was getting more of the third string reps than Adrien Martinez was, at least from what I picked up and accounted for. It's pretty big news, right? Not only is he an undrafted free agent, which is a plus, because it did seem like he had some general day 3, round 5 to 7-ish projections, but he was also the quarterback for Armand Bimbu. So he has a fan in the building already and someone that can speak to the coaching staff about the toughness, about, kind of the scheme and the play style that they would have been coming from, and give him maybe a little bit more comfort and a bit of a leg up. So I haven't seen anything or heard anything overwhelmingly spectacular, right? Definitely feels like he's going through the general rookie struggles, right? You're going to see him make a handful of plays. Haven't seen any or again heard any wow stuff, but it seems like maybe he's at least picking up on this scheme maybe a little bit better than what Adrien Martinez is adjusting to. And so the flip side of that, my biggest loser also happens to be Adrien Martinez for all of the reasons listed. You would imagine not only with him being on a couple NFL teams over the course of the early part of his career before going to the XFL, I think it was, that we picked him up from. But again, he's been with us since last year, and understanding it's a totally new scheme, new staff, etc. You would assume that he should be able to beat out a UDFA. So bit of a tough pull or tough draw here from him. And it's not to say that the writing's on the wall, because it does feel like we could go into the season only carrying 2 quarterbacks to maximize roster space, which I wouldn't love necessarily. But at least Justin Fields doesn't have like a crazy injury history, so you feel a little bit better. And you can use the emergency quarterback rule to kind of help you out as well. So it feels like either way, both of these guys are destined to have to fight for a practice squad spot. But in Adrien Martinez's case, it could be another situation where after getting a shot and getting some additional exposure with this new staff, he'll end up getting his walking papers, and he's probably the more likely guy to not get picked up on a roster anyways. I think NFL teams tend to focus on kind of that recency bias, if you will, and want to look at the newer class of quarterbacks, right, where you would have been investing a decent amount of research in. So moving into running backs, this one's going to be a bit of a cheat forgive me, but I'm going to combine Braylon and Isaiah Davis here as the two biggest winners, simply because we've heard Aaron Glenn mention up front that these guys are going to get some more run within the offense, but also just looking at the scheme that Tanner Engstrom's going to be running and how he's utilized his running backs in the past. They're going to be able to go out there and make some things happen, which is really, really exciting, because at one point, Braylon Allen arguably seemed like he was out-competing Breece Hall for the span of about somewhere between 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks before hitting a little bit of a wall. And I know if you're stat sheet watching, I think he averaged 3.6 yards per carry, which didn't look great, but when you look at the style and you look at what was happening when he was on the field, defenses really had to account for and adjust to it, right? He was able to hit the holes extremely quick, extremely hard. So you kind of got that Derrick Henry presence where, or Brandon Jacobs style, right? Where he was hitting the first guy and then he was going to carry another body or two on either side of his shoulder and churn out a couple extra yards. And it wasn't just like he hit a wall and then took a step or two forward, but more often than not, it seemed like he was making positive plays, whether it was on the ground, through the air, and he consistently fell forward or found a way to kind of pick up some of those hidden yards, as you hear him talk about. And in Isaiah Davis's case, you can argue with the amount of snaps that he's had, he was the most efficient running back out of the entire trio last year. So Isaiah Davis, one of my guys, I'm very, very high on him. In fact, I thought he was going to be the one to win the RB2 conversation last year. It just looked like Braylon Allen was a little bit more advanced than expected coming in, which was also a pleasant surprise. But I'm super thrilled for both of these guys. And depending on what happens this season, not only with just how Justin Fields can operate the offense, but also depending on how well Breece Hall bounces back as well, you could make the case that Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis will be looked at as the immediate future of the running back position in 2026. So with that said as well, flipping to the losers is going to be Breece. I know he said all of the right things so far after we got a chance to hear him at his press conference. He understands the offense isn't, new coaching staff isn't obligated to do anything specifically for him, and he's going to have to go out there and earn it, and also understands that the conversations have been had that Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis are going to get more run. And Breece is looking at this as he should. I feel like I'm a 3-down back. I feel like I'm true alpha, a workhorse out there. I'm going to prove that these guys don't need the extra snaps, and I'm going to go out there and get the job done at an extremely high level. So considering many people have talked about Breece Hall as being a top 3, top 5 back before, and kind of looking at stuff on paper where he hasn't cracked 1,000 yards, and again, that was mainly because Robert Saleh and that coaching staff was so inept that they missed him having the extra 5 or 6 yards that he needed and miscalculated. But even then, I think the total body of work is what you look at here with him. I don't think Breece Hall as a runner specifically, since he's been trending downward for the last 2 years or so, I don't think he's specifically, or maybe I should say more so the last year, but I don't think he's looked at as a top-tier elite runner if you look at 2024, whereas in 2023, you've seen him create and make a lot of things happen literally by himself, where the offensive line couldn't make holes or force a situation, and he was able to hit a couple home run things. But it's the total package. It's him coming out of the backfield. It's him when he has the focus necessary, picking up in pass protection. And it's the ability to go out there and take it to the house, 80 plus yards when necessary, or if the defense gets lackadaisical, or if he's just able to turn that corner a little bit quicker than an edge defender or a linebacker or safety coming up to try to meet him. And, if he finds a way to somehow just get a little bit more physicality in his game, you can argue he'd be able to break off even a few more plays. There was also some of the situations where it looked like he got gassed a little bit on plays where he could have broke things completely open. So hopefully the conditioning is top notch. But everything is almost working against him with it being a contract year, it being the new staff, the new scheme, the I guess less total touches that he may receive if Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis do encroach on his whatever snaps that he would get. Which also, I don't know, he never touched over 20 times in a game last year, right? So it's hard to envision that that'll happen over a complete 17 games again this year, but we'll have to see what happens with him. And then in the wide receiver room, I would say that my winner here is going to be Josh Reynolds. And I didn't want to go with Garrett Wilson. I think that's obviously the easy play to make here. So when it comes to the wide receiver 2 battle, I think the conversation really centers around 3 veterans, right? It's Josh Reynolds, it's Tyler Johnson, and it's Allen Lazard. And you'd have to imagine Allen, even though many of us hate him and, the drops are ridiculous and the penalties that cost us many big plays that we had last year was crazy. And we've also already seen what he looks like without Aaron Rodgers. But still, he brings the run blocking, brings the plus ability. He can be a threat out of the slot. It felt like he was probably going to have the leg up, but I think over the course of what I've seen so far during this offseason, feels like Josh Reynolds has slided in here, right? Not only has he been instrumental in making sure that the other wide receivers are understanding what Aaron Glenn from a play style standpoint wants, but from the scheme itself, he's already talked about it being kind of like riding a bike, and he's jumping right back into things and operating Tanner String's offense at a high level, quote unquote. So not only is he can be counted on as a early veteran leader for this team, if you will, but also he's very underrated in his game, right? I think if you look at kind of what he's done in his career outside of health, outside of quarterback play, outside of where he's ended up on a depth chart, which all is definitely still in his control to various degrees, he's put up some solid numbers actually when he's been consistently targeted. And so he looks like a guy that if it can increase the volume a little bit, he could walk away with a bit of a career year here for you. And he brings all of the same things that the other guys are going to be able to offer, right? Maybe a little bit more plus speed, but the size, the ability to go out there and run block, and also a proven ability to do it within this scheme. A bit of route running nuance that maybe someone like Allen Lazard wouldn't necessarily bring, but ultimately the hands being a big drawing card as well. So I'm really excited to see what Josh Reynolds can continue to do in training camp once we get a chance to put the pads on and actually see who some of these true difference makers can be. But right now, I think I would slot him in as wide receiver 2, which means he's definitely a winner here. And then for our loser, this was a toss-up for me. I really wanted to go with Malachi Corley, but I feel like Xavier Gibson is honestly the probably the biggest loser here for a couple of reasons. I know he's made a few decent plays over the course of camp, which is great, but one, Justin Fields isn't the most accurate guy, and so even for the replacement here that I'm thinking that's going to be a problem, but Xavier Gibson has shown a case of the drops for a bit, and also you can make the argument that with his main job being the returner, even though he's also the starting slot in years past, he also hasn't really done anything overwhelmingly great outside of that Bills return touchdown. And so many people would say the big plays are very few and far in between. Also, there seems to still be some of that rookie, conversations going on where it feels like sometimes he looks lost. Sometimes he's a little bit hesitant to want to go out there and actually return punts and different things of that nature, right? And again, you're talking about a guy that's a little bit more minuscule in size and all of these other different elements, but he brought a speed component to his game. But I think that he's the biggest loser because you have somebody that can come in and potentially be the version of you, but better. Jamal Pritchett, right? This is a guy that, excuse me, as an undrafted free agent comes in, brings, I want to say it was 4.36 speed or low 4.4, something of that nature, but he brings the speed element. He also had a much better career coming into the league than what you can say Xavier Gibson had. And in addition to that, he's already shown and been talked up by new special teams coach Chris Banjo to look very impressive when it comes to the special teams game. So he seems like maybe he'll be a little bit more of a versatile weapon. Also complements this speed component that it seems like Aaron Glenn really wants to instill within this offense. And so the writing feels like it's starting to be written on the wall, right? Xavier Gibson could lose out the return role, which ultimately means that he would also lose out the starting slot role. And for those that have been paying attention, it's not like we've seen tremendous progress from Xavier Gibson as a route runner, or that he's unlocked some level of athleticism to his game, or even that he has a strong tendency to beat man coverage versus zone coverage, right? And so with all of those components together, it's really easy for this new staff to say, we have no allegiance to you. Let's turn it over to the UDFA that we brought in, and Phil has acclimated himself better to this offense. Now, when we look at tight end, clearly Mason Taylor's a winner, right? Nobody else has really been talked about too highly or has made much noise either, from my understanding. Mason Taylor's the guy. He seems like he's going to be tight end one off the bat. Not only that, though, Aaron Glenn did hype up the fact that what's impressed him most is his blocking ability, which wasn't even a huge aspect that anybody put out there as a overwhelming strength for Mason Taylor before he got drafted, right? A lot of his scouting reports were necessarily that he was there as an additional weapon, found a way to continue to progress and step up within that offense, and then ultimately found himself playing a bigger role once LSU lost a lot more of their premier wide receiver talent. So with that said, I think this is a plus right now. It feels like he has to do a bit of everything instead of necessarily having to be relied on to have a specialty. And I don't know if you can even make the argument that he has a specific specialty, but knowing that it feels like you might have a complete tight end from the standpoint of a guy that can run block, pass block, go out there and catch, also be split out and do all of these other factors within the offense is at least a plus, because it gives you a very solid foundation and stepping stone to continue to build his game around. And then if you want to look for a more specialized type tight end, you can go out there and do that. Now, for the loser, I think it would be Stone Smart, right? If Mason Taylor's walking in as tight end one, and he's going to be more of your receiving threat in addition to taking up some of the blocking game, which isn't going to be a foundational piece of Stone Smart's game. He really is just a big-sized wide receiver. Then at that point it's taking out a lot of the allure, right? Because when you start to talk about running 12 personnel in these two tight end packages, the second tight end is going to be a guy that you want to be able to go out there and maul in the blocking game. And so Jeremy Ruckert at least has that one up on him. And even if Stone Smart has the better athleticism and potentially the better receiving game, you would end up throwing him in certain situations like the red zone, for example, or at least a situation where you're looking to put, 4 or 5 weapons out on the field to try to take advantage of maybe a linebacker that shouldn't be able to hang with them, different things of that nature. So he'll still have a role within his offense unless somehow Zach Kuntz beats him out. But I don't think he's going to be as much as the weapon as people thought when it felt like we were buying high on him. And it's not to say that he was a bad signing or anything. I just think the developments of Mason Taylor so far make him a little bit less of a moot point than you would have expected walking in. And then ultimately for the offensive line, I would get the W, again, cheating here a little bit, but the entire starting offensive line unit. And I know technically that's up for grabs, at least in terms of the center spot, but for now, Tippmann, Simpson, AVT, Fashanu, Mimbu. This is one of the first offseasons in a long time that I can remember. Not only all of these guys being healthy, not only a bunch of guys coming off of plus seasons, but the fact that these guys also just got to work together, right? It wasn't that we had 2 or 3 guys working off to the field, or there was a contract dispute, or somebody's coming off a down year and we just entered them into a new position, or we're cross training and doing all of this kind of crazy stuff. It's just guys working together. And honestly, like earlier in the offseason, it felt like there were, reports a little bit more of like Armand Mimbu being beaten and, John Simpson maybe having a bit of an off day here or there, Joe Tippmann still adjusting. But it didn't seem like these guys were egregiously beaten. And I know the defensive line isn't fully powered, but Rashad Weaver's had some days. Will McDonald has been called unstoppable, and Jermaine Johnson has been out. But, it's not like Quentin Williams is game wrecking the day, or Will McDonald or Weaver. So for a situation where the offensive line is at a disadvantage because they're not playing with pads, huge plus. And my loser here took me a minute to kind of pan out what I wanted to do here. I wanted to go interior, but ultimately I would think it's tackle Obina Easy, one of our IPP pickups from a year or two ago. At this point, I would say that you're going to turn things over to the Leander Weigand kid, Leander Weigand, kid from Germany, and I think he's more of a guard anyways, which in my eyes is a bit of a plus. But regardless of which position he ends up playing, it feels like you're going to transition things over, right? I think just when you look at the structure of how they want to do things, Leander is going to come in. He's 25. He at least has some level of kind of like semi-pro experience to work off of. He has the ridiculous athletic profile, and it feels like he could potentially progress here in terms of being an immediate future option in 2026 to at least pick up a solid backup position as a swing guard / tackle, something of that nature. But even if that doesn't develop, it feels like the IPP roster spot is one where you can take advantage of someone that's going to be a little bit younger, has only worked through the scheme. So if you want to go with the whole kind of blank slate mantra to work here with, he's a guy that you don't have to iron kinks out of. You just need to make sure you're putting some structure and figure out how you want to implement his development. So those will be my biggest winners and losers. Let me know what you guys think, again, for the offensive side of the ball here, and I'll catch you guys again. Peace.